GPS mapping apps have gotten really powerful and really popular. Apps like onX can show you detailed satellite imagery by season. So in other words, you can see what the forest canopy in a specific spot looks like in the springtime versus the fall. These apps can give you a 3D view of a drainage. They can sync with your cell cameras. Now, some folks in the hunting space would argue that these apps have gotten a little too good. Like they're uncovering too much. They're making it too easy to get into places that used to be ignored. And then there's this question of what are these apps going to do with all this data? You know, all the thousands or maybe millions of waypoints and tracks that users are inputting into these apps every day. Could this data ever be used in a way that maybe doesn't benefit hunters and anglers? I'm Editor-in-Chief Alex Robinson, and I use these apps all the time. It's not uncommon for me to have both onX and HuntStand open on my phone at any point throughout the day. So I want to know the answers to these questions too. And I decided to ask freelance journalist and public land hunter Christine Pedersen. Christine has interviewed the folks at onX, including their founder, and she's talked to some of the big names in the public land space. She's been reporting on wildlife issues in the West for years. Here's what she has to say about the onX effect. Hey, Christine, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I want to tell you that no matter what you say in the next 45 minutes, I'm not canceling my onX subscription.
I see. All right.
I can't live without it. I'm sorry.
Why? Why can't you live without it?
Because you know how sometimes like before bed, you might I don't know, scroll social media, or maybe if you're like more kind of mentally healthy person, you might read a book. Mm-hmm. What I do is I look at onX and all the different places that I might hunt someday.
You go to bed with onX?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. I mean, there's a large segment of society that would sound weird to, but most of the listeners here are probably like, no, I go to bed with onX too. So I get you. Okay, good.
I'm glad you understand. But with onX and apps like it becoming so popular and also so powerful, mm-hmm. What are just really broadly speaking, what are the general concerns with these digital mapping apps and how popular they've become?
I mean, for starters, it's almost hard to find. I mean, it's not hard to find concerns, but most people are like you and they just love them. And maybe there are some concerns in the back of their minds, but they're just not going to worry about it. Just like maybe we have concerns about Amazon or Facebook and we're just not going to worry about it. But the three that people talk the most about, which are easily the biggest concerns that come to mind, are what they're doing with all of our information. So data security, where all that's going, what if they're disseminating it, all of that. There's the impact of getting more people onto the landscape, into remote places, interacting, pushing wildlife around. And then for the curmudgeons out there, the idea that digital maps have ruined people's honey holes or taken their secret places. So those are kind of the big three if you were going to break it down.
Okay. Well, let's do them one at a time. I think maybe the scariest or maybe most looming one is this issue around data security or data privacy. And if you think about it, we're putting an incredible amount of data into onX. Just we being the collective hunting community who are making, marking tracks through terrain that might be hard to get through, marking waypoints of, where we've seen animals, turkey roosts, different useful access points. We're putting so much data into this app. So what can onX do with that data?
So very little, turns out. And you and I had talked about this before too. This very quickly gets my tinfoil hat out when I start to get nervous about where my information is going and what people know. And I mean, I'll tell you this, acknowledging I'm an outdoor journalist and not a tech writer. But as far as I can tell from talking to attorney and doing a bunch of reading and talking extensively to the company itself, they don't do anything with our points. They store them. They're locked on onX servers and they're available to you, the user, and also to law enforcement in the event of an investigation, i.e. like if they're subpoenaed. But otherwise, except in the event of, I don't know, a hack, something like that, there's actually not a lot of risk to your data.
Okay, that's good. And that is all just locked down in the user agreement that we all sign, but don't read.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's mostly, well, maybe we'll say it this way. It's basically private information, but it can be unlocked and become public in very kind of rare, specific circumstances. And one of those actually did come up in a pretty public way. I'm talking about waypoint 6. So can you tell me about what the infamous waypoint 6 is and why it matters?
Yes. There's nothing that provides me more journalistically than nerdy things. And that's what this is, but with real implication. So there was a case a few years ago in Wyoming, just over the mountain from where I live, actually, where 4 Missouri hunters brought out a ladder, put it in between 2 public corners where there were 2 pieces of private land and 2 pieces of public land, came together at a corner, put a ladder over the corner and climbed over it, hunted deer and elk, were successful, packed those deer and elk out. So they stayed on public land, albeit crossing this corner, so in the airspace of private land, all being debated. And it blew up. There were trials, there were appeals, there are still appeals. There's a lot of money in this. There's a lot of public land in this. There are a lot of hot feelings in this. And in the process of this trial, the 4 hunters used onX, which is the way that they could do this and could pinpoint this exact spot. And so their points were subpoenaed, all their onX data was subpoenaed. And one of the hunters had, at some point, hit a spot on his onX on private land that was called waypoint 6. I talked to him, he doesn't remember how he hit it or where it came from. He had at some point deleted it, like you just go through and you delete the erroneous points that you've put in your onX. But then that came up at trial with the landowner's attorney saying, see, this proves this person stood in this spot because there's a point here. And the defense attorney says, no, it proves that a guy touched his phone with his finger in a spot. And it ended up becoming a whole lot of nothing. It didn't go anywhere, but it still makes you realize that anything that you record so anytime you fat finger your phone or it's snowy out and your screen's wet and you're trying to toggle around to go somewhere, swipe, and you touch something, those spots are there forever. Even if you delete them, they can still get subpoenaed and looked up, assuming you end up in a situation that your data gets subpoenaed.
Yeah. Talk about the mechanism of how that works. So the private landowner's attorney basically had to go to onX and say, give us this data? Like, how did that part work?
So it came up during the legal trial because they were charged with trespass. And so it's law enforcement that went to onX and got the data. An individual, like a citizen, is not going to go to onX and say, I think somebody trespassed on my land. Give me their data. Like It's law enforcement that goes and gets it through a subpoena.
So it wasn't like onX is just like freely giving out this information. They were like legally obligated to, basically.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. No, you can't get in a beef with your neighbor, sure that your neighbor's coming on your land, and then like go to onX and see if onX will prove that your neighbor's trespassing.
Gotcha. This is a different scenario, but kind of similar topic is in a missing persons case, right?
Yes. Same with law enforcement. They also said that family, so if like family of a missing person requests that they release the data to help find that missing person, then release the data that way, it sounds like, in attempt to help find the person who's missing, which we can probably all appreciate would be helpful.
Yes, definitely. Okay. So those are all kind of cases of individual user data.
Yeah.
But how about, can onX take an aggregate of our data? Say like an example would be taking all of the roost tree waypoints on all of the public lands in America. So whenever you go turkey hunting, you're trying to find the roost trees in the evening to roost turkeys. If you're like me, you mark those roosts in onX with a little turkey roost tree icon that is in onX. So I personally have waypoints like that all over the country. And, you multiply that by all the thousands and tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of turkey hunters who are doing the same thing as me. Could onX take that data, aggregate it, make it like a turkey roost heat map, and then turn around and like flip it to users and say, hey, if you want to see our turkey roost data, you have to pay an additional, $20 a month. Could they do something like that?
Oh, wouldn't that be wild? No.
Thank God.
Right now, the answer is no.
Good.
That's all part of the user agreement. So the long thing that we all sign without reading it. And so even though that's anonymous, then onX considered, I asked them about this, and they consider your waypoints, all the stuff that you upload to be, so your turkey roosts, they consider that what they call, quote, personal content. That's yours. Like that can't be gathered up and aggregated, anonymized, sold, done anything with. Now, could they change their user agreement and then ask you to sign another one and then do that? Sure. For whatever it's worth, it doesn't seem like it's in onX or these other digital mapping companies' best interests to do that because they're subscription based. And so it behooves them to keep you, a subscriber, happy so that you keep giving them their $109 a year, whatever. And so that, can you think of anything that would piss off a bunch of hunters more than a company gathering up their waypoints and selling them to someone else? It would result in a lot of people leaving onX, which is not in their best interest if they want to keep getting their money.
Okay. That makes me feel a lot better.
Yeah, there you go.
I'll keep marking turkey roost. Okay, switching gears a little bit. One of the arguments kind of boiled down against onX, or really against any digital mapping app, is that it just makes hunting access too easy. Can you kind of elaborate or explain that, like that argument and why people are making it?
I mean, we've all pulled up to that spot, right? That state section or that bit of tribal land that recently became available to non-tribal hunters, or that piece of Forest Service land that we thought was ours. We'd never seen anyone there before. It was our little bit. And then there's a truck there, or there's a souped up Jeep with more bumper stickers than that souped up Jeep should have and out-of-state license plates. And no, that's never happened to me before. Don't worry about that. I'm not bitter. And we've been mad and we've cursed and we've done all the things and we've gone somewhere else. And the easiest thing to blame is digital maps and onX. Right. And if, I spent all this time poring over paper maps, and I talked to my Forest Service manager and I talked to the game warden and I brought the game warden's wife cookies. And that's how I got this spot. And now this dude from some other state south of mine is in this spot. And
I mean, let's be honest. They're probably from Minnesota.
Yeah. Yeah. But the problem is, so I mean, you can say that, that it has, Randy Newberg called it the great equalizer. I mean, we can also, this conversation for another day, but their hunting has certainly had a real you don't belong here issue and some gatekeeping issues in its history. And I think this, just because you often get taught by your dad or your grandpa or something like that, right? So if you don't grow up in a hunting family or you don't grow up in an area with hunters, you're not going to do it. And there's all these hurdles and it's hard to get into it. And digital maps, and then a lot of times they're associated like hunt area success rates and all that kind of stuff, makes it easier to figure out how to hunt and to figure out where to go. So in a lot of ways, it is a great equalizer. You don't have to bring the game warden's wife's cookies anymore to find these places. And that can make people grumpy. There still are limits, right? You still have to go out and find where those turkeys roosted. You look for that ridge when you're laying in bed at night and cruising your maps and you find the stuff that looks really good. And then you go out there and you look around and you go, oh, that's not actually as great as I thought it was going to be. So there's still a big degree of having to figure it out yourself, even if you have way more information than anyone has ever had in the palm of your hand.
Yeah, I definitely think you're onto something with just wanting to attribute the new pressure to new technology.
Right.
Because there's really nothing to tell you that that's not true.
Right.
There's really no way that you can prove that those other trucks at the trailhead where there used to be no one before onX. Now there's trucks there. There's no way to prove to you that it's not because of onX. Where if you kind of pull back a little bit and you look at like kind of the broader reality of public land hunting, in some ways there are fewer places to go.
For sure.
So now we're all kind of condensing to the available access. And then in a lot of places, there are like fewer animals, there's fewer tags, there's fewer opportunity than there used to be. And that shrinks everyone down. Those are big environmental things that are hard for us as humans to just see.
Yeah.
Where we can just like so easily see on social media and like blame the out-of-state hunters in onX. It's just so much more convenient to point the finger in that direction.
Yeah. I mean, especially the number of animals that are out there. So the number of tags that are available, and there are more people who want to hunt and fish, and there's more people who want to go outside. So there's just more people who want to do it. So even if there wasn't digital maps, there's an increase of people who want to get outside and recreate in some way. So there's a higher likelihood there's going to be people there, whether or not they lay in bed and look at onX or they lay in bed and look at Forest Service maps.
We'll be right back after the break.
Thinking of spring? Discover the beautiful white sand shorelines of Alabama's beaches and an abundance of outdoor recreation opportunities. Coast through miles of bike trails or tee off on world-class golf courses. Enjoy the thrill of a big catch when you cast into the Gulf of Mexico. Visit a state park or nature preserve for some hiking or birdwatching. Most of all, just get out and have some fun. Make your vacation plans today at alabamabeaches.com.
So we're all talking about like people pressure and how that affects us as, hunters or outdoorsmen and women. But the other impact is obviously on the wildlife. And you've reported, just beyond this story, you've reported on this a bunch in a lot of different places on how we're not even talking about hunting pressure in some cases, but just more people pressure or human presence has an impact on wildlife, which we don't always account for. So can you talk about how one, like that has kind of maybe been facilitated by digital maps? And then two, like what are some of the examples of impacts of that people have on wildlife just by being there?
I mean, you're right. It is something that I'm really interested in, partly because I spend so much time outside. And so it's something that then I sort of struggle with myself in terms of thinking about how I can still do what I want to do and have the lowest impact that I can. And it's part of it is just there's an increasing number of studies showing that just humans being in the wild or whatever we want to call it, being outside, which is where we belong as a species, belong outside, but that we bump around wildlife, and we always have. And if we hadn't pushed most wildlife into smaller and smaller little postage stamp spots, it would be less of a problem that we bump them around, but they're in smaller areas. And so then when you put more of us into an increasingly small area where wildlife are, then it just causes them more stress. And, I'll go with the examples, I guess, first. There's a bighorn sheep herd in the Tetons that winters and summers, so lives year round at like well above 10,000 feet. And they're a really rare herd. There aren't a lot of them, like 120 or something of them. And the study showed that backcountry skiers going up there were bumping them, and not dramatically. Like backcountry skiers are quiet and they're kind of stealthy, but bighorn sheep are paranoid and have really good eyesight. And so they could see these guys like a mile away, a really far distance away. And then it makes them scared. And so they get up and they move, and they have very few calories. So they really can't afford to keep getting up and moving and getting up and moving all winter. And so it was showing that their herd number is like the herd population is shrinking. There's a lot of work being done in Colorado. There's current work being done. There's work that already has already been done just because recreation is such a huge part of Colorado's economy, showing the impact on elk, which obviously isn't universal. There's a ton of elk in Yellowstone and Rocky Mountain National Park and people everywhere, and the elk seem totally fine with it. And there's other places where elk aren't fine with it, and they're, not reproducing and at the rates that they were. And there's, sage grouse and grizzly bears. There's a lot more examples that I won't bore everybody with at this point. But where digital maps play a role is that they just, again, facilitate getting people out there, which isn't a bad thing. And everybody says, it is good to get people outside. People need to go outside. It's where we belong. It's how you build a constituency for the outdoors. It's how you get people to care about the outdoors, is showing them how cool it is out there. But at some point, something ends up giving. And now, if you talk to the onX folks, and even if you talk to a lot of the researchers off the record, but they'll say that it's not up to individual users to not go outside, but that it's up to state agencies working with people, working with user groups to figure out a way to do it more responsibly. And so, onX is state agencies aren't going to come to us and say hide. Let's just blank the Tetons out in a map and pretend like they don't exist, or hide these trails or conceal these areas that people want to go to. But instead saying okay, well, we're having an issue on bighorn sheep. What can we do about that? Are there areas? Are there times of the year? Are there places that people should just avoid? Which they have done in that case. They have finally done. And interestingly, those maps, those either closure areas or voluntary closure areas, are now layers in onX. So now when someone's back there skiing, they pull up their onX and they can see, oh, these are, voluntary bighorn sheep closures. Maybe I should not go there.
So is maybe the hopeful, if we're trying to be positive about this, maybe the hopeful outcome is we can use how specific these mapping tools can now get, or how precise these tools can now get to actually keep people out of places.
Yeah, or help better inform them, right? That instead of having a sign at a trailhead that people maybe see, maybe don't see, now it's their pop-ups on your app. So now you pull up your app and you're in a spot and you're going to have a thing that pops up and says, hey, you're in a bighorn sheep closure area, or hey, you're in a sage grouse lekking area that's closed to recreation from April to May, or something like that. So yes, if we want to look at this in a positive way, that could actually be a net benefit of these, that it builds greater awareness.
Yeah, that's interesting. And, in some ways that moves toward even more reliance on the digital maps, which, maybe the argument that folks don't talk about a lot is just kind of the downside of being out in the backcountry and then always kind of checking down to look at your phone, which I kind of have mixed feelings about. But it does seem like if we're trying to be really precise about where to go, where not to go, can we access through this boundary? Can we cross this corner? You have to have a precise mapping app to do all this stuff.
For sure.
You spoke with the founder of onX, right? What did he have to say about all this?
He's a big fan of onX. He has,
he wasn't we should shut it down. It's gotten too big.
Really went too far with this. Yeah, no, I think he created a program that, was originally a chip to go in a GPS. But, he says he wanted something to help him figure out where to go and figure out where he was and not get lost and save time instead of driving down this road that looks like is the road that you wanted to take. And then you get 15 miles down that road and realize, oh no, this is definitely not the road I meant to be on. Now I got to backtrack and go somewhere else. And it still does, Baseline still does what he wanted it to do originally, with all of these other wild features like connecting to your trail cams and all that kind of stuff. And they certainly are growing and expanding. And there's, like you had mentioned, there's a lot of other competition out there doing similar and different things than what onX does, all sort of trying to separate themselves from each other. But bottom line, it tells you where you are and it helps you access land you maybe didn't know you could access. And it gets you back to your truck in the dark.
Yeah. I'm sure there's some marketing thing that's like, go with confidence, or like, know where you stand. I'm sure I'm probably like remembering some of these like onX marketing terms. But when you get out of the truck and it's dark and you're going into a place you've never been before, having the ability to see exactly where you are the entire time and how to get back, it does I'll go farther or go into a spot where I never would have gone before because I would have been scared about getting lost or not knowing what it looks like when I got there. But I'll just go to a new spot that I've never been to. It'll be well before light and just hike in, like without really a care in the world.
Right.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But like I can put myself in the shoes of the guy who's been doing that because that's how his dad taught him to hunt that spot. Mm-hmm. And he learned it as a little kid, and his dad learned from his granddad, and it feels like it's this passed down thing. Mm-hmm. I could see how me showing up there and doing the same thing they're doing now suddenly could be really infuriating. So I can understand the complaint or the pain point there, but I think we all also have to live in the reality that this is not slowing down, right? Like onX is only adding more tools and more subscribers, and more people are figuring out how to use it more effectively. Like there's no going back really, right?
No. And I mean, even if tomorrow onX as a company shut down, I mean, there's still just that technology exists now. And there's a handful, half dozen or more other companies in this space now too. So yeah, I mean, like it or not, it's here to stay. And this technology is here to stay. I don't know that people's thoughts on someone else and their spot shouldn't be minimized. It is. It does make you grumpy. It does make you swear at the Jeep covered in bumper stickers. But it just is a fact now. And to some degree, there's always a risk someone was going to show up at your spot.
Right.
It might be a bigger risk now.
Yeah. And trying to end this on a positive note, you also have a better opportunity of finding a new spot.
For sure.
And I think that secret spots can kind of come and go. Places that were secret suddenly get pressure and then they don't for a while. So in some ways, getting your secret spot blown, that might force you into finding somewhere new and cool, possibly better. But you have to have the open mind and spirit and also onX to go find it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, the Jeep in my spot did make us go somewhere else, and we did get into elk, and it was a great experience where we went. So yeah, no, I think you're right.
This is not a hypothetical.
Oh yeah, shoot, yeah. No, I was pretending like it was hypothetical. It's not hypothetical. But you're right. But you're right. It does make you go. It does make you go other places, and onX has opened a lot of land, has connected, has bought easements or has worked with nonprofits to buy easements, lease easements, to open up more opportunities. So there's those acres. And then there's just the acres that you realize that you can get to now because you have a map that tells you precisely where you are. And so you don't have to rely on the no trespassing sign that's not put exactly where it should have been put. And you can squeeze through areas now that you realize are public that you couldn't in the past. And we'll see what happens with all the corner crossing stuff. Maybe one day it'll, depending on what legal expert you talk to, it could one day result in corner crossing being officially legal or not. But that would open up a ton of land too. But yeah, bottom line, has given a lot more opportunities, even if it has potentially added more people to certain areas.
Yeah. Yeah, this is kind of my last question for you, but onX definitely has been part of the public lands culture, like public lands movement or whatever you want to call it, but just say within the last 10 years, kind of the energy and interest in getting better access, protecting public lands, just this kind of growing idea that like we should all kind of fight for these places and, go to them and enjoy them. I think onX has done a good job of trying to be a part of that.
Yeah.
It feels to me a little bit like that whole movement now has to mature a little bit from like, yeah, like just get out and like just get out there and like kind of fight for the land you rightfully owned, to maybe now getting into like this like really precise application of like different corner crossing laws. And like the thing you were talking about before with the bighorn sheep of like, yeah, this is public, but we kind of have to preserve this area during this one specific time for this sensitive wildlife. So from kind of this broad like energy of, yes, everyone get out there. Well, now the people are out there and we have to sort of figure out what to do with them. Does that feel right to you? Or are you seeing the same thing, like either in the stories you're doing or just, I mean, you live in the West surrounded by public land?
Yeah. Does there need to be more nuance to figuring out what we do with ourselves in the outdoors more? Probably. Yeah, in fact, there does. There needs to be more nuance and there needs to be a lot more working together than there has been historically. The efforts to keep this bighorn sheep herd alive or to preserve an important lekking area of the Gunnison sage grouse in the Gunnison area of Colorado were not easy. They were really at different times divisive. And I think that divisiveness comes when suddenly, there's an increasing number of people, and then all of a sudden the government's like, "Ooh, let's not have people there." And then they try to shut things down, and then that never goes well, ever. Right. And so I think there's a place for rallying. I think there's a place for making sure that public lands don't get shut down. But I also think that there's a big need for people sitting down and having an actual cup of coffee with each other and figuring out what makes most sense and where we as recreationists are willing to give a little, and then working with scientists to try to figure out what like does actually make most sense. Instead of shutting down an area all year, does it actually just really need limited use during calving season, right? Like during a couple months in the spring or something like that. For sure, we need nuance. I'm always pro people having opinions and getting out there and standing up for what they believe is theirs. But I also think that we aren't going to get anywhere if we just keep yelling at each other, right? Like that we need to sit down, and maybe that's just a horribly cliche way to end this conversation. It's like everyone needs to have a cup of coffee.
I don't know, you could have had me.
But it's the literal like sitting down and everybody eating a stale pastry and having some coffee and talking about what matters to them, and then figuring out how to make it so that everybody gets like a little bit of what they need without just thrashing the places that we all also collectively love.
Yeah, I think that's where the onX and access conversations can go bad, when it becomes just the classic old land battle.
Yeah.
Like, I was here first. This is mine. You're an interloper.
Right.
Like, that's what has been happening in America forever. So hopefully we can kind of use the technology to get ourselves out of that a little bit.
Yeah. We can end it with that positive note.
I mean, if nothing else, I just know my turkey roosts are safe. So
yes, your turkey roosts are safe, and people can, I mean, it was Randy Newberg that said this to me, that it now takes any excuse away from trespassing. And I do think that there's a fair bit of, I'm probably fine that went on before now. Right. And there's probably a fair bit of trespassing that happened. This ridge looks roughly like it's public. And now you know. So, the days of carefree trespassing are out the window.
Yeah. Well, Christine, thanks for your time, and thanks for all the reporting on this. And yeah, you can find her story on outdoorlife.com. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. It was fun.
This episode of the Outdoor Life podcast was edited by Mike Peterson of 85 Audio. It's hosted by our editor-in-chief, Alex Robinson. Thanks to OL contributor Christine Peterson for her in-depth reporting. You can read Christine's full story on the onX effect at outdoorlife.com/onX. music by APM Music. Hey, did you know Outdoor Life has relaunched its cover shop? You can sift through our collection of more than 600 vintage OL covers featuring everything from turn-of-the-century mountain men to big bucks to bear attacks. You can get the art custom frame for deer camp, or you can just buy prints that start as low as $14. Find your favorite cover now at outdoorlife.pixels.com. That's outdoorlife.pixels.com.